Hey, Stewart's Chapel, this is Don Pierson, and this is Thursday, February the 17th. Thursday, February the 17th, and we're continuing our look in this series of devotions on In the Presence of Predators, and we have been looking at the religious wolves for some time. Today, I want to talk to you from Colossians chapter 2. There's one verse in chapter, we'll read verse 4, and then we'll skip down to verse 8. And just go all the way down to verse 23. This is not original with me. In fact, I wish I could remember where I got this. I've been carrying this around with me for a few years, so I don't really remember the source, but I'll let you know that I'm not the one that saw this path in Colossians. So basically what we're going to look at, remember yesterday I told you they come to distort, and the seven things they distort. What I want to talk about today is the seven means or the seven ways by which they distort. And that is pretty clear in Colossians chapter 2. Let's read verse 4 and then we'll jump down to verse 8. Now this I say, lest anyone should deceive you with persuasive words. With persuasive words. Verse 8. Beware lest anyone cheat you or rob you, or actually the Greek word can be seduce you, through philosophy and empty deceit, according to traditions of men, or according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. For in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily, but you are complete in him, who is the head of all principality and power. In him you were also circumcised with the circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of the sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ, buried with him in baptism, in which you also were raised with him through faith in the working of God, who raised him from the dead. And you being dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he has made alive together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses. He's wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was against us, which was contrary to us, and he has taken it out of the way, and having nailed it to the cross. Well, that's a sermon. I've never actually preached on that, but that'll preach. Having disarmed principalities and powers, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it. So let no one judge you in food or in drink, or in regard to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath, which are a shadow of things to come, but the substance is of Christ. Let no one cheat you. Now, this word here in verse 18 and the Greek word found in verse 8, they're not the same. I've got a mark. They have different numbers. Greek words are numbered just like Hebrew words. And this one in verse 18 is 2603. And I can't really read my writing, but it appears that the one in verse 8 is 4,000 something 12. They're not the same words. The one in verse 8 is more about seduction, cheating you by seduction. The one in verse 18, let one no cheat you, that one is by defrauding you, to defraud you by deception of your reward, taking delight in false humility and worship of angels, intruding into those things which he has not seen, vainly puffed up by his fleshly mind, and not holding fast to the head, from which all the body, nourished and knit together by joints and ligaments, grows with the increase that is from God. Therefore, if you died with Christ from the basic principles of the world, why, as though living in the world, do you subject yourselves to regulations? Do not touch, do not taste, do not handle, which all concern things which perish with the using according to commandments and doctrines of men. These things indeed have an appearance of wisdom in self-imposed religion, false humility, and neglect of the body, but they have no value against the indulgence of the flesh. They have no value. None of these things have value, but they distort. Religious wolves distort through philosophy. Various philosophies. They'll come up with all kinds of philosophy. In the world, there's books devoted where men have come up with philosophy. Philosophy is about creation. Philosophy about the meaning of man. Philosophy about right and wrong. They distort through philosophy. They distort through vain deceit. They get you to think that you're more of yourself, that you're more than what you really are. They come in and they begin to make you think that you're the only one with truth. You're the only one that has anything that is of value. They distort through traditions, and he talks a lot about the traditions of men. The distortion, I'll give you one. I'm wearing a white long sleeve shirt. Now, this was not the case in all of Belize, but there were certain Guatemalan villages in Belize that had a problem with me coming in and preaching because I did not wear a white long sleeve shirt, because they had been told that a preacher or missionary should wear a white long sleeve shirt, and if they didn't, they weren't of God. Well, that's a tradition of men, okay? And we have plenty of them. And he even talked about all the law. He talked about what you eat, what days you have the Sabbath, etc., on and on and on. We just continue to create these. The problem is that when you grow up in an area, like say in Flintville, when you grow up in an area, the traditions they're so ingrained and passed from one generation after another that people begin to think that the tradition are biblical. They distort through traditions. By the way, that lets you know that the enemy doesn't die. The demons will burn in hell, okay? They've been around a long, long time. There's not new ones coming around. They don't procreate. So they don't have a problem in waiting generations to create these. They'll start them. They could start one today with your family. That your family in 3 generations thinks that that's just the way it ought to be. Worldly righteousness. And the worldly righteousness is all about the whole list of what the world expects you to do that talks about righteousness. This is a false righteousness. It's a false holiness. It's empty. It has no value. Then there's the religious rites. Now there's tons of religious rites, and a lot of people don't think Baptists have religious rites, but I remember taking a class in seminary that was about all the symbolism and the religious rites of a Baptist church, just even in the placing of the pulpit and just the various things that we put. We have religious rites that we follow. Some of them are biblical, but not all of them are biblical. The Mosaic Law, they'll distort by using the law of Moses. And as he talks about circumcision in here, this issue of Gentiles being circumcised as new believers, that died with the early church. That died with what is called the Jerusalem Council. When the early church dealt with whether Gentiles should be circumcised, that's a done deal. That is not something that you and I need to be visiting. And the last one is the doctrines of men. The doctrines of men is probably on this whole list the one that I have the hardest time getting my hands on. You see, the doctrines means more than just the teachings of men. A doctrine means that these are things that are so ingrained, teachings or things that are so ingrained that they believe that they are truths. They're not truths. They belong to man. They're not doctrines of God or truths of God. They are doctrines or truth that man has created. And I would say that throughout history, man has spent a lot of time creating these various truths that they pass on to their children and their grandchildren. And after a while, they become more than traditions. They're just matter of fact. That's it. You see, the religious wolves, we have a tendency to think that they just come into our life and they go. The enemy's been using religious wolves for a long, long, long time. They will duplicate. They will reinforce. They basically do the same thing over and over again. I made the statement this morning that the battle against legalism, against religiosity, is a constant battle for me. Um, I I yearn to be able to rest in the work and righteousness of Christ without anything added. Now I say that, but I recognize that there's probably more in me that I'm not aware of. I have a hard enough time dealing with this stuff that I am aware of, much less the stuff that I don't know aware of. But here's the thing. Both of these have a tendency to corrupt our ability to see the Word of God, to interpret it, to proclaim it, to use it in our own life, to apply it in our own life. The religious wolf, he doesn't come with one mean. He has 7 means by which he distorts, and Colossians reveals those 7. Love you, my friends.